Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of r slash Tales from Tech Support. In today's episode, angry client blames us and the wrong karma gets him later. How fast do you want to go? Backups keep the machine running. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. Angry client blames us and the wrong karma gets him later. Working for an IT company in the late 1990s, we service clients all over Ireland. One client was a concrete company. The owner, Len, was quite wealthy, but had a reputation for having an explosive temper, and would blow up for no reason. We were always walking on eggshells while there just because of his reputation, and one day we experienced his temper. I didn't smoke, but the girl with me, Helga, was a smoker. We had been there at this concrete company all day, and when our boss, Derek, arrived to pick us up, he was met in the corridor by Len. Derek was speechless as Len screamed about how these kids, meaning Helga, and I, both in our early 20s, had been out in front of his business smoking, and how terrible it made his business look, and how he wasn't running a creche. Keep in mind, this business was out the country, and only the employees usually went past the main entrance. Helga and I both looked at one another as Len screamed a tirade at Derek. He was shouting so loud everyone in the office could hear, and his voice would actually break in places. He was so out of control. Shocked, I quietly said to Helga, "Were you smoking out front?" She said, "Absolutely not. I know what he's like. I haven't had a smoke since we got here." We were puzzled, but didn't dare go out to face that. When the tirade ended, Len told Derek never to send those kids to his business again, and stormed off. Derek sheepishly walked into the room we were in, and he was white from shock. He asked why we were smoking out front. We both said we were not. He believed us but just said let's go. Well, it turns out Derek got a call next day from one of the ladies in Len's concrete company explaining that they had a young girl in for summer work experience, and it was her that had smoked out front. Len had saw her from a distance and assumed she was with us. He never apologized to Derek or us, but we were told we could still do work at his business. What a privilege! Anyway, some time later karma kicked in. I heard this story from a neighbor of Len's a while later, a guy I worked with from the same town as Len. Len owned several large haulage trucks and trailers for delivering expensive concrete beams and tanks his company manufactured. He would scream at his truck drivers if the trucks were not perfectly parked side by side close to each other at the end of the day, and did just that one evening at a new driver, so the guy moved the truck nice and close to the next one. That night/evening one of them went on fire, not sure how, and the fire spread to another one or two, because they were parked so close to each other. LOL, imagine how angry that made Len, but there's more. Pretty soon after he replaced them, likely covered by insurance, one of them was at the docks to load heavy concrete beams onto a ferry, and the captain of the ferry insisted that he drive the truck on, to unload. The truck driver had wanted to unload from the dock, but the captain insisted he drive the truck on. While driving on, the ferry tipped and the truck, trailer, and beams all dumped into the water. Apparently, insurance refused to cover it, for some reason, some technicality about it happening off Irish soil at sea. Anyway, Len blew his top again. LOL. Note, I got the second, karma, story secondhand, so I'm not sure if all the details are 100% correct, but the guy who told me was confident it was true because he's from the same town, and everyone delighted in telling that story, because Len was notorious from his temper tantrums, and not liked very much. How fast do you want to go? The captain called me up to the bridge. This was my first trip as chief engineer. It was a fairly elderly offshore vessel with a myriad of old-age problems. It was designed to sit in a particular position over the seabed using a dynamic positioning system, and thus didn't really want to go very fast. We joked that she'd go faster backwards than forwards. "Captain, you mentioned a couple of days ago that you needed to do a full power trial on the main engines?" Me, yes, it's in the PM system. They're overdue actually. Occasionally, we'd wind the engines up to full power and measure various parameters to ensure everything's okay. Mostly, we were interested in the peak pressures in the cylinders, but it was also a useful check for the cooling systems, and when checking against the vessel's full speed, a good indicator of whether the hull needed cleaning. It was reasonably rare to wind the engines up to full power. They consumed about 8 tons of fuel an hour at that loading, which was expensive. Captain, we're heading back to port. I think now would be a good time to do it. Me, aye, Captain. Yes, I really said this. It annoyed him no end. We got on well. We'd been sitting in an offshore wind farm for the last few weeks doing some light diving work. But I knew that we were running out some bits needed for the job. We were evidently heading back in to resupply something that normally took about 12 hours or so. I headed down to the engine room to inform the second engineer that we'd be doing the full power tests on the engines. He was asleep in the watchkeeper's chair, unsurprising really. 12 hours watches do take their toll. We cracked out the equipment needed for the tests, and got everything prepared. It took about 1/2 an hour or so to move out of the wind farm, and then we saw the engines going up to full load. A call to the bridge verified that we were ready for the test. The test itself took about an hour, and everything came back normal. I walked back up to the bridge to inform the captain that it's all done. Me, testing completed. Nothing abnormal. Captain, no, I think we need to do it again. Me, why? Captain, check the time. It was about 21:00 at this point. And would normally take us about 3 hours to get into port at normal cruising speed, and we'd left the wind farm at about 20:00. But we weren't doing cruising speed at full load, we were doing about 14 knots. That'd take us about 2.5 hours back to port. That put us alongside at about 22:30, half an hour before closing time at the pub. I immediately saw where this was going. I called the engine room. Me, repeat the tests. Second, what? Me, trust me. The second engineer dutifully redid the tests, extending our necessary full power for another hour. He finished just before we took the pilot to get into port. It was noted in the log that we'd consumed so much fuel as we were doing full power trials. Totally justified, of course. We arrived alongside, tied up at about 22:30. I remember that as I was waiting for the gangway to go down with the captain and second engineer. As I said, the captain and I got on well. Backups keep the machine running. Another, very recent tale. Caution, German without proofreading skills. You can guess what the tale is about just from the title, and see in the end if you guessed right. The setting. One robot cell with an IPC asterisk, industrial PC, see below, which is connected to the customer's company LAN, VLAN. Customer difficulty, easy. It difficulty, easy. Players. $me. $Ritke, the IT guy of the customer. $CUST, the customer. Story. We installed a new robot cell with an IPC with Win 10. My policy is that the $CUST gets a patched system which is up to date, and can decide if he wants to run it off-grid, or connect it to something, and takes the responsibility for security and updates. This customer does the latter, and his external $Ritke gets an local admin account and sets his things up, AV backup. After a few days, the $CUST calls me and tells me that every night at around 9 p.m. the IPC is shutting down, bringing the production to a halt. I have no clue what happens, so I decide to visit the site at 9 p.m. and have a look. Did you already guessed it? Yes. The backup runs at 9 p.m. And the standard setting for this customer is do the backup, and then shut the machine down. Why? Because the IT put the IPC in the office group for the backup, and not the machine group. And the office workers have to leave their PCS on, they make the backup and shut down. A short mail to $Ritke solved this rather quickly.